Welcome to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy with me, Philippa.
And me, Julie. And this week we thought we'd think about the concept of just playing. It comes up in therapy, it comes up certainly with my students. When is the child doing therapy and when is the child just playing? And actually, is that the same thing? And partly this came out of a conversation I had with, I don't know, was it a friend or a family member, somebody I don't know very well, was asking what I'm doing at the moment. I said, oh, I'm a play therapist. I play mainly with adopted and looked after children, but that's mainly my work. And then I teach that. And they said, oh, isn't play great? It's wonderful to be able to escape from reality. And I questioned that. And I said, oh, to escape from reality, or actually sometimes what I see is the children, certainly in a therapy session, it's very intense and it's play is a way of escaping into reality. So I suppose that's what I want to think about. When is play something that is a relief? It's an escape. It's a moment to not have to be with my other stuff. And when is play a time to actually delve right into my story and a safe way to be with trauma, to be with difficult things? And play is the reality, but you escape into the play in order to look at that reality. So I suppose that's what I'm thinking about, is the different roles that play can have for us.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking particularly about a child. I don't work with this child anymore, a little girl. And I knew a lot of her story. And there was a sense of me often waiting for her, quite tragic. And so it was a life story that included a lot of bereavements. And I had thought, as her parents had thought, that she would come and play about those bereavements in the therapy session, because that's what we thought she needed to do. She was talking a lot about death and dying and funerals and all the rest of it. So there was a sense of always waiting for these stories to emerge. But in all the time that I saw her, there were never any stories. There was never a narrative. We played a lot of games, a lot of board games, a lot of dice games. But what she loved to do most of all was clean the doll's house. I've got quite a big doll's house, and it's got a lot of furniture that gets rearranged. Each child wants it to be rearranged. But what she wanted to do most weeks was take everything out, and I could help her with that. Clean everything, little dustpan and brush, hoovers, everything, and rearrange it in the way she wanted it to be. And making choices about, no, I don't want the washing machine, but I do want the tumble dryer. I want the cooker and the saucepans, but I don't want the fruit bowl. I want 3 beds. She decided exactly how she wanted it to be. And for week after week, I was thinking, I think quite naively, that she was wanting to set up a story, wanting to get going with a story, a narrative, perhaps about the many bereavements she'd experienced. But actually, no story ever emerged. But I think on reflection, and actually I read this in a Graham Music text a couple of months ago, and it just shocked me because I thought, how have I not known that? And he's saying, the children who it appears they just set up stuff and then there's no narrative. He talks about the setting up as the process, as what they need to do, as the therapy in itself. Because this little one was suddenly in control of something, whereas she hadn't been in control of all those deaths. She was able to order things in the way she wanted them to be, not in the way her parents organized her life for her. She was little. And I'm sorry that I didn't know that at the time when I was working with her, because I think all the time I was waiting for a story to emerge. Oh, and I wonder what's going to happen in this house. Oh, you set out 3 beds. I wonder who the 3 people are that the beds are for. That was nonsense, Julie. Hands up, I got it wrong then.
Yeah.
She just needed to sort things and tidy things. And that was her therapy. And if I was to work with her or another child again, I would be reflecting much more on, oh, doesn't this feel good for you to decide where things go?
Mm.
Just where you want things to go. Or you're making choices and you definitely don't want those things. And that being what she needed to work on, not on me sitting there waiting for this story to emerge.
Yeah. It makes me think sometimes with sand tray, children will line up kind of everything in lines in the sand. And again, it's okay, what are they going to do with this? And they just every tiny thing comes out, and it might take 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and all the little tiny bits are all just lined up in rows in the sand. And then there's that moment where they look at it, and there's that, I think you're right, from a therapist's point of view, the expectation that something's going to get going, and then they take them all out again, one by one, and put them all back into not my order, that they were all in their own order. And sometimes they don't put them back in order. So they're all ordered in the sand tray, but then they take them out and just throw them in the biggest box in the biggest way, and there is no order in that. And that in itself is, I suppose you could wonder, or maybe it's just that, it's, I've done that bit now, I'm going to move on to the next bit of ordering, and then they line them up again or do them in a different way or hide them, but in an order under the sand. And there's that thing of, okay, now we're going to find them, and they find them themselves and take them back out again. And it's their process, and that waiting, like you say, as a therapist, of, okay, now we're going to start. And actually the child's already started playing, haven't they? And we're 3 steps behind that.
Yeah. And if I'm trusting them, I should have noticed, but I didn't. That the child's desire to have agency. And it can be sometimes, I'm sitting here looking at my therapy cupboards, the Lego. So often the Lego gets sorted into colours, or the coloured pencils get sorted into height order. They all get sharpened and then they're all put in height order. And they don't become characters, they don't take on symbolic meaning, there isn't a narrative, but it's the process of sorting, lining up, having agency. Because I think so many of the children we see, either at some point in the past or now, or just because they're little, they don't have a lot of agency. They don't get to make a lot of decisions. They don't have the freedom to decide things for themselves.
But I wonder, Julie, if that is adults. I like order. My house is very ordered. There's not a lot of mess around. There's not a lot of, and that's not because I don't mind mess. If people come and it's all messy and I'm not avoidant of it, but I like my space to be ordered. And some of that for me is that when I was a social worker working in child protection, I often went into houses where there was deprivation, maybe, and there wasn't toys, or it was very messy, very chaotic in many ways for children and young people. And often the toys would be broken, or they wouldn't, bottles or plates and things like that would be quite different. And it would feel chaotic. It would feel, and obviously they were needing support, so you wouldn't be going into a house like that. They didn't need that. And I was in my early 20s then, and then when I had my child, because I wasn't I wasn't ordered before that point. I was actually very messy. I tell you once, I was so messy that the guy next door when I lived in this nursing home came to find me to tell me that my room had been burgled,
Yeah.
and it hadn't. It was just how messy my room was. But the experience of that, and then having my child and wanting them to always know where their things were. And there was something, as an anxious parent, secure in the knowledge of knowing that all the Thomas the Tanks were in one box, that all the jigsaws were right. There was a sense of safety, I think, that was in the order of of the house, of the toys, of the. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder if, as adults, of children, that agency of knowing I've put this there, and for me, that's the right space for it to be, and it feels okay for it. I wonder if it's not just in a playroom, if in life, sometimes we do the sorting, clearing out your wardrobe, clearing out the bathroom cabinet, that there's something just, like you say, that you can control that moment, can't you?
Yeah, and I remember when I was studying, I would procrastinate, pause, delay doing things. And I would go and tidy my desk, tidy my office, tidy out my desk drawer, because there was a sense of, I need a bit of tidiness and order around me. I need to have something that can happen quite quickly and that I can see and I can touch before I can then get back to my essay or my dissertation or whatever it was I was doing. And I still have that. I don't think I am as neat and tidy as you, Philippa, around my house. I like it to be tidy, but I dump things a lot. I have piles of things. And then every now and again, I want to scoop it all up, tidy it, sort it, and then feel great and promise myself I will never let it get untidy again. But of course it does. But yes, thinking about that sort of play that children do, perhaps in a therapy session or at home, what looks like just sorting or preparing for a story. But in fact, I know now, and I've learned from that little girl and from other people's writings, that is a process in itself. That it seems to calm the brain. It seems to help us get into the window of tolerance, the section in the middle where I'm not hyper-regulated, hypo-regulated. It can help me, and I can see the children. It can calm them, but also get them to be very alert, to be engaged, to be active in what they're doing. Because there's real purpose in it. When I watch children do that sort of play, it's very energized and it's very, I don't know, it has a real sense of purpose and agency about it.
And I guess that's like we say, that's no different for adults, is it? It is that I know what I can do, and sometimes that might be the only thing that you can do. Whether you're an adult tidying your kitchen drawer, whether you're the child tidying the doll's house, you can do that, and you can succeed at it, and you know that you've got choice within that, and that you've got this amount of time to do it in, so you can just do it. And there isn't that pressure, that anxiety, that am I going to get this right or wrong kind of thing going on.
And also wondering what might happen next, because I think when a child starts a narrative, starts a story in the play, then there is a sense of apprehension, because neither me nor the child know where that's going. And that can be scary. And knowing when you're sorting out the house, you know when it started and you know when it's finished, because all the furniture is either in the house or stacked to the side. There's an end point to it. Same as the kitchen cupboard, there's an end point where the stuff that's going back is back in the cupboard is closed, the stuff that's going to the bin has gone to the bin, and it has an end point. And
there's a sense of achievement. that sense of, for me, it's a sense of satisfaction where there is no piles in my house, and but there's that like moment where you look and you think, "Phew, I've done
Yes,
that,"
I
you
did
know,
that.
and
Yes.
yeah, for children, sometimes they don't, there can be a fear of that, can't there? Whereas in that contained moment, there can be that, I just did this and this looks nice, and Julie's just said it looks great.
Mm,
And so that in itself is just, it's complete, isn't it? You don't really need any more than that.
yeah. And I see now how important that is for children
Mm.
in a therapy session, but also at home and at school, just a chance to be free to sort.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that sort of free play that doesn't have an end purpose. It does have an end purpose, which is everything's sorted, but it's not a traumatic type of play. And
Mm.
something you and I were talking about earlier before we came on is how important it is as therapists, educators, parents who are spending a lot of time with children who've experienced trauma and adverse experiences, how important it is to also spend some time around typically developing children and young people to remind ourselves of what play can look like, what play and relationship can look like. And certainly both of us over the last couple of weeks had spent time with typically developing children. And I've forgotten what norm, I don't mean norm, typical or healthy play looks like.
Yeah.
Because I spend so much time with children who have not had that experience or are struggling to have that experience. And there's a sadness and a joy that comes with that.
But I wonder if for those children that there will be moments where there is where they are playing in a typical way, and it might be, that their brain age is a little bit younger than their chronological age, but the play that they're doing is typically what you would expect children to do. So it might be that they're pretending to be a cat or a dog. They might be a little bit older than 2 or 3, where you tend to start to see that. They might be 7 or 8, but actually that is a typical way of playing, isn't it? It's not a trauma play.
Yeah.
Particularly, it might be that you're filling in a gap, so there is a bit of therapy, but actually the role of just being a cat and coming along and being stroked as a cat and being fed a little treat or a dog, and that actually is typically developing play, isn't it? And sometimes I think in the therapeutic sessions, you need some of those moments where they can just be children just playing with an adult or adults.
Yeah.
And that is as important, isn't it, as maybe the trauma processing stuff.
Yeah. And that's something that comes up with students quite a lot, with more experienced students are working with children with complex needs and complex trauma backgrounds. So our second and third years are working with those children this year. And a lot of our lectures and materials are about the trauma processing. But what our students discover in working with a child who's experienced huge adversity is within the therapy session, or sometimes for a whole therapy session or weeks of therapy sessions, it feels like just playing. And the students come with the kind of question of, oh, am I really being a therapist? Because we were just playing football. We were just playing Snap. We were just playing a dice game. We were just playing Families Go Shopping in the role play. But really helping students understand that is crucial for children as well, to be able to move in and out of what we might think of as trauma play and trauma processing, and to be able to move smoothly back and forth to a typical play for their age, or as you say, for a younger age, is they've missed out a bit. But it can be alarming, I think, especially for a student therapist, to not to not be doing the trauma processing all the time, because that's what we're training to do. Surely that's where the help is. But the help is also in the building the relationship and being able to experience play with a child where the child feels that they are being enjoyed and that we are enjoying them.
Yeah.
But
And I think it's also that just being alongside, isn't it? It makes me think about teenagers sometimes. If I'm working with a teenager and we might be doing some story work or processing stuff around school, that they want to have these conversations. They're really coming. They know they're coming to therapy and they know they're coming and they want to talk about tricky things. But then sitting in a room and talking about tricky things is really tricky and you don't really want to do it. Do you know what I mean? And then you're all awkward and self-conscious and all these sorts of things. So actually, most of the time, I just play side by side. So I do games where we sat side by side, and it might be that we're throwing ping pong balls into plastic beer pint cups. I shouldn't say beer pint cups. Or we're using bean bags and seeing if we can get them into different baskets for different points. And we're just sitting side by side, and there's a rhythm to it. They go, I go, they go, I go. And they don't have to be anything other than who they are in that moment. They don't have to put that mask on that they have to at school and sometimes at home or with their friends, that they can be sad or they can be excitable. If they are a really bouncy kid, they can be really bouncy. They can sit on the chair, they can stand on the chair, as long as they're safe. They can stand up, move around, or they can just be low and flat, and they can be what they want. But there's a rhythm to what we're doing. And in that, sometimes you find they might talk. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes they tell you about their favorite TV program. But I think the value of being in a space with play, even if it's not purposeful, as in we're acting something, that there's that very repetitive, rhythmic, but you get that attunement, that you get that just being, you just get that presence of, I've got an hour and somebody's going to sit next to me. I always give them snacks and a drink. So they've a bit of feeding, a bit of nurture, and they can just be, or playing double or Jenga or something where you don't have to talk if you don't want to. You can just be present with, we've talked before, haven't we, about the third thing. There's this thing in the middle of us that helps us connect.
Yeah, what's running through my head though is the panic certainly I can get into if somebody has commissioned 12 sessions or 10 sessions and there are goals associated with that funding, and the goal is for the child to this, that, and the other, or the child to talk about this, or the child to process this. And the sort of the pressure that I can feel, the therapist, whether it's the parent who's self-funding and has brought the child, or whether it's the local authority or a charity or school that's funding, and they have a goal in mind. And of course, there is a goal in mind. There is something that has wobbled this child and something that isn't going smoothly for this child in their life at home or in their relationships or their belief about themselves. So always listen into that. But when I meet the child in the room, then the child needs to be able to take that therapy where they need it to go. That's my training. My training is a child-centered, mainly non-directive. That would be another conversation, the difference between non-directive and child-centered. But that sense of the belief of the child's own agency to take things where they need to go at the pace they need to go at. but the funders have given me 12 sessions, and I know that's unlikely to be renewed sometimes. So at what point do I, or should I, or can I chivvy the child along and say, the reason why mum or the reason why uncle or the reason why your social worker felt this might be a good space is this, and not putting the child under that pressure. But at the same time, if I do my outcome measures at the end, or if there's a report at the end, the report might be things have got worse, or the presenting problem is still there. And then have I failed as a therapist? And so when there are those periods when the child is, inverted commas, just playing, is that wasting time? Am I helping the child to avoid an issue? Am I colluding with the child in covering up, avoiding, moving away from difficult stuff? Or am I respectfully accompanying the child in the ways that they most need at the moment? This is the sort of push-pull of therapy that I often have.
Yeah.
It's rare that I get endless numbers of sessions. Some children I've seen for 2 or 3 years, and we really can go at their pace.
That is actually a conversation that we were having in our team meeting the other day around, I suppose what we were talking about was children who are avoidant, shut down, withdrawn, so find it much more difficult to access, express, talk about what's going on for them, because they've learned the safest way to be is to not access it. And actually, how do you support those children, especially when we're thinking about limited funding
Yeah.
to do the outcomes that we've been asked to achieve for them?
Yeah.
And actually what they've what's kept them safe is to not talk about it, to not share it, to not show it. And that's helped them survive up until that point. And then all of a sudden they're supposed to come to therapy and start talking about it. It's not, or playing it out or acting it out. Even in play, I guess you can get children who start to get to that point and then realize actually, and then stop the play. So those children or adults, anybody, it's scary to enter into this level of connection with something that's upsetting. It might not be masses of trauma from the past. It might be bullying in the present, mightn't it? It might be a sadness. It might be, it could be anything, but we have to connect a little bit with those experiences in order to play them out, to talk about them, to whatever it is. And that can be scary, and often we don't want to. And I suppose for me, it's thinking about the foundation for all of this is safety in relationships.
Yeah.
And so we are doing the work, aren't we? They might not in that moment be able to, or even in those 12 sessions, talk about it or play it out. But you've laid a foundation that says there is safety and there is a space in these therapeutic sessions. So maybe next time, if they come back and have another 12 sessions, then it won't take the 12 sessions because we've laid a blueprint of relational experiences, haven't we? Through that play and through that connection. And for me, that is the most therapeutic thing that we can do, because that is the foundation that we need, isn't it? Is that there are relationships that are safe. There are relationships that value who you are and play, whether it's sitting next to a teenager, throwing beanbags into a basket, whether it's cleaning out the doll's house, lining up, and that play says we value where you are in this moment. We value who you are in this moment. And when you're ready, or you want to be something different, or you want to share something different, this is the space that you can do that. But
Absolutely.
we do it on your terms, really.
Yeah, because we can't do it any other way. If I try to force it, if I try to guide it, if I try to lead the play in any way, the child soon lets me know, either by not coming or by sometimes telling me that's not what we're doing. The child will let me know that this is not safe, they are not ready. And so, yeah, as you said, thinking about each 12 weeks of commission as one stage, and a child may then, it might be within that 12 weeks, they've got to the stage where a grown-up can be safe. The limits of a session can be tolerated, the beginnings, the middles, the ends, the time limits. And the child leaves after that 12 weeks, knowing that there are people out there like Julie and Philippa and others who, when I'm ready, or when I would like to, or maybe when I'm a teenager, maybe in my 30s, maybe in my 50s, I can come back to this. And I think it also, and I've seen this happen so many times, especially in a school, it gives the child an experience of a safe adult that they then begin to seek out some of those practices, some of those strategies with other adults, whether it's a family member, a staff member at school, a club member, a friend. They begin to see that not just therapists are safe, but there is safety in many adults and many older people, and perhaps their peers as well. That trust is something that exists. And so believing that the therapy is never just those 12 sessions, never those 12, 50 minutes. It's actually very rarely what happens in the session.
Yeah.
It's the between and the after.
It's just that I just think the therapy just allows a child to practice it or to test it, whether it's the relationship, whether it's the play, whether it's the disclosures or the processing. And actually, yeah, we'd be pretty arrogant if we think that actually it's the therapy that makes the difference. I just think the therapy is the bit that lets them practice, and then the outside world is the bit that makes the difference, really, isn't it? Because they've thought, actually, it was okay in there last 4 weeks, it was fine. So no, I can do this with Granny, I can do this with my uncle, or the TA, or whoever is in their world that is consistent and predictable and much more present than we as therapists ever are going to be, really.
But yeah, it is so much the practicing. And I've watched many clients come in here, I think very nervous and very as though that they've got some sort of field around them that is very self-protective. And their idea, the child's idea, is the only idea that can ever be tolerated for them. But I know from them and from their school and their parents that, say, for instance, school friendships are not going well because this child may come across as very bossy and very one-sided and only got one way of playing. And by the time you're 7 or 8, nobody wants to play with you if you're not tolerating other people's ideas or incorporating other ideas into your play. And that's something I found happens a lot here in the room, is children who'll set up a story and will tell me what to do all the time. And I'm making this not a judgment, or wondering what's going to be most helpful for this child. With my non-directive hat on, I'll follow exactly what the child says. But I also know for this child in their outside world, if they play like that, then nobody wants to play with them. Their parents are getting frustrated, their siblings are frustrated, and they're finding it really difficult to maintain friendships, they don't get invited to parties and play dates and all the rest of it because they've got a very fixed idea of how they're playing. And so I'm thinking of one particular client last year who I would challenge it and say, actually, I don't want to do that. You've asked me to make the Enchanted Forest, and so I've started making the Enchanted Forest in the way that makes sense to me. But you're now telling me you wanted it to be a certain way. And I'm saying, but that's my part of the play. And I'm doing a lot of thinking about that. To what extent do I maintain my congruence, and do I express to the child what's going on in my mind? And with this particular child, we might often be talking about that's what's in my head and that's what's in your head. But I think what's in your head hasn't got to my head yet. And so I'm letting you know what's in my head. My head is to have a purple enchanted forest with all the purple things we've got in the room. That's where I would like to make it. But you're telling me you wanted it to be green. But your brain didn't tell my brain that. And so we've had lots and lots of moments of practicing and trying out. And initially, this child would get really cross and frustrated and puzzled. But recently, before we ended, this child was able to say, do you know what, Julie, I'm going to let you know something that's in my brain. I don't think I've let you know it yet, but it might make a difference to how you're going to do the forest or whatever. So a sense of this child now being able to recognize somebody else in the play, whereas previously this child would only play pretty much on their own, and I would be witness and supplier of goods.
Yeah.
But by the time we ended, we were actually collaborating on things. Now, I don't think for this child, their friendships have changed, particularly in this year, but I'm really hopeful that as this child moves through school, becomes 8, 9, 10, they'll draw on this experience. So if I was to look at outcome measures from beginning to end, things don't really look that different. But I know internally huge changes have been happening just by playing. The content of the stories, I don't think was ever that important.
Yeah. It's made me think a little bit about Theraplay and thinking about within Theraplay, the dimension of structure and challenge really, and how they fit together, and how often children need to control is the word we'd use, that they want it in a certain way, in a certain thing. And with Theraplay, I guess what we're helping them to do is experience not having it their way, but it's more the risk of failing, isn't it? That's what I feel. It's the risk of this will fail and I'll feel bad because I haven't experienced that failing when I was little and have my parents scaffold me. Because children fail all the time. They can't put the bricks on. They can't fit the shapes in the ball, or they can't hold the basher for the xylophone. And as adults, we scaffold that, don't we? We hold their hands so they can make the tune. We guide the bricks with them so they can fit it in the hole. So they're typically developing play helps them experience frustration and failure. And it's not therapeutic processing of trauma. It's just that they're learning, aren't they? And they're scaffolded by an adult often. Sometimes it can be an older sibling, can't it? But it's by somebody else who's bigger, who's caring, who's consistent, who's predictable, that's helping them manage that frustration and failing and turn it into achievement and success in a really simple way. And often in therapy, I would see that actually for children, that's often what's going on. It's not that they want to control, it's just that they're that little person who hasn't been scaffolded. So they need to control it so that they don't feel that really horrendous part of failing, which, feels tricky for all of us. And I think that sometimes through play, you can help that happen. So in Theraplay, it's much more structured. So it's like you were talking about non-directive. In Theraplay, it's pretty much the opposite. It's pretty
Yes.
directive and adult-led. But
Yeah.
I feel that even within that, there needs to be some self-efficacy for the child. So I will say things like, I'm going to do it twice, and then you can do it the third time. So that they know that they can do it. So almost I demonstrate it for them, help them to succeed, and then they do it, which is what you would do with a little child. Or sometimes I think it's thinking about, why is a child making this choice? So it might be that we're doing a cushion stack and I put one cushion on and they say, no, I want this cushion. Now, sometimes I'll say, we'll do your cushion next, because I need to hold them and I want them to trust that I, as the adult, have made a decision that's going to be successful and they're going to be okay. But sometimes I'll say, oh my gosh, yes, that's such a great cushion for that space. Let's use yours. And that is about the child, maybe, that we've talked about, that avoidant child, that child who hasn't really expressed a voice, all of a sudden being able to say, but I'm making a choice. And that's, again, going back to when they're little, and you might say to them, do you want a pink yogurt or a yellow yogurt? And they say, I'll have the yellow yogurt. And we, as adults, say, oh, that's a great choice. That's the one I would have chosen. That's my favorite. And so what you're doing is you're celebrating that child, that toddler can make good choices, can trust its own internal knowledge. But for some children, they haven't had that, have they? So
Yeah.
I think you talking about that little boy, about, do you follow him in a non-directive way, or do you put a little bit of structure in place and say, actually, this is what I'm thinking, helping him to experience that thing? I think in a very structured directive thing, you can also do the opposite of allow some of that free choice, because I think it's thinking about the individual child, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do they need? Do they need their choices celebrated? Or do they need to trust the adults got them? Do they need to be able to have the self-efficacy or whatever it is to just play it out and have somebody follow? Or do they need to understand and be able to survive and accept that they can still have fun, even if it isn't exactly how it was in their head?
Yeah.
And it's think. So whatever kind of play you're doing, I think you need to have that flexibility within it, don't you? To play where the child is at.
Yeah, and play in my own head, I'm playing with lots of choices. So often I'm in a situation in a therapy room with a child, and the child's doing something, playing something, immersed in something, and my mind is working so quickly. I'm not saying anything. I'm making sure I'm within the proximity that the child can tolerate. But my mind is thinking, what does this child need most from me right now? Does this child need me to get out of the way and give them space and time and validation to do what they've already started doing? Does this child need me to invite myself in? Is this child too shy or too nervous of inviting me in because the fear of rejection? So do I invite myself in? Does this child need me in this moment to challenge a bit about what's happening? And ultimately, there's always that choice of, does this child need me to say, whoa, stop, because this isn't safe? So that's always, I've got the safety button. I know at any point I can utilize that. But my mind as a therapist is constantly thinking about what does this child need most from me? And it depends on partly what I've heard about the child through their referrers and their family, but ultimately what this child is letting me know about how they see the world. What is it they really need a bit of support with? And is that, giving them space to make lots of their own choices because they've never done that? Or is it doing the opposite sometimes and saying, actually, I'm going to make a choice about that. What are you going to do? And seeing what's most helpful for that child.
Mm.
And I mean, these are endless discussions, ethical discussions to make about how do I make a choice about what's best for a child? Do I trust the child to know what's best for them? Absolutely. Are they yet at the stage that they can express that or guide me in how to guide them? Not always. So I'm having some guesses about what might make life a bit easier and smoother for them outside the therapy room. And then the classic one we often have is, I don't know if you've got paints in your therapy room. I've got my big bottles that I keep hidden, and then I've got my little bottles that can be used up in a session. And for years, the top on the blue one is really tricky. And I don't know, it's an old one. I've never got new ones. Just keep refilling them. If a child takes the red one and says, Julie, I can't open it, on the whole, I'll say, you can't open that one. And I'll accompany the child to find a way of opening the red one and the yellow one and the green one. Because most children over about the age of 5 can open those paint bottles. Might be a bit of a struggle, but I know they can do it. The blue one, I absolutely know most adults couldn't open this blue one. It's really tricky. So I'll say, that's the really tricky one. We're going to open it together. Now, I might have a child who's so determined. No, I can do it. I can do it. I'm good at these things. I'm going to be better than you at this. You're going to really struggle to do that. But it's a very sort of shut down child, the helpless child, the learned helplessness, who with everything says, I can't do it. I don't do it for them. For another child where helplessness isn't part of their profile, I'll just flick the lids on them and off we go. So it's making a call on what does this child today most need? Do they need to build the efficacy and the agency to be able to do stuff themselves? Or do they just want to paint and me taking the lids off all of them is just going to be helpful? So it's constantly making those calls, which is exhausting. It's why at the end of the therapy session, my mind is really tired because I'm constantly thinking about, do I move in? Do I move back? Do I say something? Do I not say something? Do I make a sound? Do I remain silent? Do I sit close by? Do I sit far away? And all of that in just playing.
And I think that brings this full circle back to, and sometimes kids do just want to play, don't they? They do just want to paint, and it's messy, and there's nothing to be interpreted about it. There's nothing to be inferred about it. They're just painting a house or making a mess or putting handprints on a thing. And I was saying to you, sometimes I kind of use the analogy of a pizza, that sometimes a pizza is a component of all its parts to be broken down and deconstructed. But sometimes a pizza's just a pizza and you just have to enjoy it, don't you?
Yeah, just eat it.
Yeah, and then that's what I think for kids. Sometimes they just want to paint or just want to play in the sand. They're not creating anything to be deconstructed. They're just playing cars or dinosaurs or whatever it is in the sand. It's trickier, I think, with Theraplay to just play. But I think there are times where they we just sing nursery rhymes and it's just It's giving them early experiences and all those sorts of things, but they're just in the moment, in their thing, doing what they're doing, just as a typically developing child. Because even children, not even all children, have those times where they are playing because they're enjoying the playing, they're not processing, they're not
Yeah.
doing something else. And that is probably, one could argue, more therapeutic than anything else, to be in connection, in your body, in that moment, regulated, connected, enjoying that time, whether it's play on your own, whether it's play with your peers, or whether it's play with your adults. That is yeah, priceless in many ways.
And I'm thinking, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the window of tolerance, where we have this image of the window as being quite large in the middle for many of us. Not that everything is smooth within that window, but it's being able to smoothly move in and out of stresses. So it's not that everything in the window of tolerance is calm.
Mhm.
It's we can cope. That's our coping. And most of us, most days, are within that ups and downs, small stresses, and we recover and we come back again. And then every now and again, we have our hyper moments where we say we lose it, that we've lost the rag, we've become very hyper regulated. And then at times, we might become hypo regulated. We switch off, we dissociate, we flee away from things. And watching children in therapy often find that their window might be very small, and yet their hyper section is huge, or the hypo section is quite huge. And I think of therapy as dilating, making bigger that middle section, that window of tolerance, so that they can move up and down through the ups and downs of life smoothly. They can move from one part of their play to another part of play, to one relationship to another relationship. And I think of the therapy session as helping a child sort of dance through the ups and downs of life, because a therapy session isn't all calm and lovely, as it's full of ruptures, repairs, jiggling moments, awful moments, stomping moments, and then sleepy moments, calm moments. And it's really witnessing a child as they learn to go more smoothly between their sections. And you even see it, the children who move, initially, sometimes they'll come into the room and they'll play 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Everything's very scattered. And then over time, I can see they spend sort of 10 minutes doing one thing. And then they integrate that into the next thing. Oh, I'm going to use the sand tray then to do this. And then I'm going to use that. They begin to integrate their play. And to me, that's like a picture of the window of tolerance, that middle section growing. And then being able to tolerate and recover from the wobbles that happen every day, the small disappointments. Oh, I couldn't get the lid off the paint. Oh, I'll find another way. Oh, my favourite dolly got a bit of green paint on her cheek, and I can't get it off because the previous child has painted the face and I can't get it off. And so the next child has to find a way of being with this, and how they begin to build up their sort of emotional muscles. That's what when a parent or a social worker or foster carer introduces me to a child, I'll often say I'm like a doctor for your emotions, for your inside muscles, for your emotional muscles, and that we can move more smoothly between them.
Yeah, that's a lovely way of describing it, really. And I think I'll put a picture of the window of tolerance and maybe put a link at the end of the
Yes.
description just so people can find it, put over your head. Hopefully when this goes out, I'll put a little picture if I can figure out how to do that.
All right.
Of the window of tolerance, because you couldn't quite see your hands in there. You'd have to
Oh,
put them
right.
over your
Sorry.
face.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'll do that. But yeah, I think that's probably thinking about the window of tolerance and the difference hyper and how you work with that in play. I think that might be a really nice topic maybe to do another time. We're coming towards the end, Julie. We've been talking for an hour already
Oh, my goodness.
about these things. Thank you for listening to Pondering Play and Therapy, and we ask that you subscribe, leave us a comment. Comments are really the ones that we want, aren't we? We like if you leave us a comment about your thoughts about the episode you've listened to, or any ideas for future topics or guests. If there's anybody you think that actually it'd be really interesting to hear them on Pondering Play and Therapy, we would be happily approach them. Yeah, so thanks very much for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.